And welcome to Tech Tuesday. I'm Steve Leahy. So I'm working on this Ford painting with these two pickup trucks, and I got to the wheels and I thought it'd be kind of fun to show you guys how I get those spokes done on these wheels. So if that's something you're interested in, this is the video for you. So let's get started. Okay, so here is the painting, and you can see what the HD stencil has left for us, this gray area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a copy here, and I want to start working from the inside, very inside of the wheel out. So for these copies, I use Staples Premium Bright White. It's really nice. And then the blade I use to cut all them out is a number 11 X-Acto blade. It's just really sharp, works real well. So the deepest, darkest areas are first. So to get that color, I'm going to use Wicked Opaque Jet Black. And then what I found was I needed to add a little bit of reducer to that. And then I also added a little bit of pyrrole red because the car, you can actually see the body of the car behind in these dark areas. So I wanted to give a little bit of hint of that red. So those are the parts that are like really, really far in there. The next thing to do is to kind of get that secondary area. So that's the part that you can kind of see beyond the dark areas. And there are really three sections to that area. So the second section, you notice I'm cutting it out, but I don't take it out. I just leave little hooks or tabs at the end of it to hold it in. And then this third section I'm going to take out. So I'll show you why I did that on the second section in a few. So we'll get this piece out, and for this, I added a little bit more pyrrole red to the mix just to kind of give it a little bit, make it feel like it's more in front of that really darker area. Darker is really recessed, so lighter areas kind of pop forward. So this will get the inside of the rim of the wheel and still give it a feeling like it's really tucked in there. It's still really dark, but now I can just pull that section that I left in, and I can do that next section. So it's kind of a neat way to do it where you don't have to cut out two separate individual stencils. You can just kind of leave one piece in as my patented meat skewer holding everything down. So this is nice because I can use that dark color to shade a little bit on the wheel hub. And then I use my Art Tool FH6 template to put in some of the finer details. This template's great. It has just about every imaginable curve on it. And that got the rim of that hub in. So the next thing is the little highlight on the inside of the hub, and that's done with Wicked Opaque White and a little bit of Cobalt Blue. So it's just a hint. It just gives it a little bit of shine in there, and then I kind of clean it up with that dark red color again. And that inside of the wheel is pretty much done now. So we can move on to the next part. And that is going to be the rest of the hub here. So I start with the darker parts of the wheel hub because I have that darker red color. So this is a good color to kind of block everything in. Now the question is could I have sprayed the whole inside of the wheel red and then just darkened it? I could, but it has a different feel. Doing it this way gives those individual pieces the kind of their own life. And that is a what could go wrong moment. So the airbrush I was using, I traveled with, and I had the needle retracted and forgot to push it back forward, and it blew paint everywhere. So this brush is the Grex XGI with a 0.2 millimeter nozzle, and it's got straight pyrrole red in it. It'll get a little bit of reducer in it too. And I jump back to the shading color again, and kind of lock that in. So again, I'm using the same color, so they all kind of go together. Now you notice there's a bunch of red splat from the accident there. It's not a big deal because most of it's going to be covered with red anyway. But with the eraser, I just kind of got the red out of the areas that are going to be like really not red, like the hub of the wheel, the actual hubcap. So just use the eraser to take that out a little bit. And next up is the whole wheel, the whole inside of the wheel. So I'll remove the cutout of the hubcap, and then I'll cut out the actual wheel itself, the whole thing. So this way I can kind of get the rest of the red in. Now again, could I painted the whole thing red? Probably. And so for the wheel, for the hubcap, I just grab a little bit of KUTG gold tape and put it on the back of that cutout of the wheel, the hubcap, and that keeps that clean. So I could have painted the whole thing red and then done the darker areas, but this way has a neat effect, as you'll see as we go along. What happens is the pyrrole red kind of bleeds out onto the darker areas, and even though it's really thin, it still is opaque. So it'll start to blend in the edges of what I just did. So it's really nice. It kind of combats that feeling of like a jigsaw puzzle, like you just where your paintings feel like they're all just pieces stuck together. This really helps to smooth out those edges and blend them out a little bit. Uh, so that overspray really does help a lot. Plus, if I just hit it with the whole thing with red, I would have lost the HD stencil in there. I wouldn't have been able to see it. So this is kind of the best of both worlds. So jump back to the same dark red shadow color and start to work in those shadows on the hub of the wheel. And again, this is the same color I used earlier, so it just blends into everything I've already done. If I need to re-strengthen an area, it's really easy to do that with this color. I do obviously have to be careful of that little blue highlight there. I don't want to get, red paint on that and wash it out. Okay, since I have that color in the brush, I'm going to jump to the little edge here, the little ridge on the wheel. Line that up real well, and that gets sprayed in. Great. Okay. Next up is the highlight on the wheel hub. So this is done with the Iwata Micron CMC. It handles the white paint a little bit better than the smaller B. And I jump back to the B for the rest of the cleanup. And that, obviously that highlight color is the same, yellow and cobalt blue. So then I use the shading color to kind of finish up the rim of the tire or the wheel. And that part is ready to go. So now the fun part. So this is all the details. Same colors, but I'm using the Winsor & Newton Series 7 watercolor brush. And I like the size 00 for the scale. It really has a nice point on it. So just jump back and forth between the darker red and then this is basically straight white until I added a little bit of yellow to it for the reflections. The yellow comes from the lines on the parking lot, actually. So a little bit of golden yellow in that. Notice I'm saving the spokes for the end. So I do work from back to front essentially with these wheels. Makes it so much easier than trying to weave all this between spokes. Do the spokes first and then try to paint all the background in. It'd be a nightmare. And more yellow. Now jump back in with a straight pyrrole red to kind of clean up some of the edges. And it's just a matter of bouncing back and forth, jumping on the palette and picking out the colors as they kind of pop up in the reference photo for me. So here's a little bit more of the dark red to kind of set off that hub. And you can see how the splat that happened earlier is just about gone. I knew it would be buried, so I wasn't really too worried about it. I just wanted to make sure it didn't get everywhere. Okay, now the spokes. So what I do is same thing, start from the back or the inside the wheel, and I cut out all the spokes or make slices in the paper for all the spokes that are on the inside of the wheel, or essentially the other side of the wheel. And then I flip the paper over and use the knife blade to kind of open up those cuts so that they have a little bit of a width to them. And then I grab some pink, which is opaque, white, and pyrrole red, mix that up in the brush. And that's what I'm going to use to kind of start laying out these spokes. It's really important to me to get these right. People who own these cars really know them very, very well. So if you just kind of guess with the spokes, people know. So I try to be as accurate as possible. And when you spray through that really lightly, you get these indications on where those spokes are supposed to be. And then I grab some pyrrole red and go back over those. Now I just kind of paint over with the pyrrole red and they kind of sit back in there pretty nicely. I don't have to do much else to them. I want them to be darker. I want them to sit back in the wheel. So I don't want them to pop forward. Just going to clean them up a little bit. And grab another copy. And we're going to start doing the spokes that are in the front. So this is fun because if they cross over, I'll just like kind of cut and then skip over the spoke. Because again, these don't have to be exactly perfect. They just have to give me an indication of where the spokes are because I'll be hand painting them after anyway. So same trick here. I just open up the back of those cuts to let the paint kind of get through that a little bit easier. And then for these, because I really want to be able to see them. I want them to kind of be a wider cut essentially. I'll take a little bit of 600 grit sandpaper and sand the back of the paper, and then I blow out all the dust with the airbrush. You can do that with this heavy 28-pound paper. Now that has a nice wide opening, and now I just kind of spray in the pink here, but it looks like I'm hammering it, but I'm really not. I'm spraying in light layers and just letting it build up and dry, as I'm spraying it. I don't want to flood it because it'll make a mess. And there are most of the spokes. So now, unlike the ones in the back, I hit the other ones in the back with Pyrrole Red. This, I'm hitting them first with pink. So this will help them pop out forward. They'll be a lot brighter than the ones in the back. And that will give it that feeling of depth in the wheel. So I'm not worried about over and unders, where the spokes cross over one another. I'll take care of that later on with the shadows. So I'm just kind of like getting the meat of the spokes in, as it were. And constantly checking the reference photo. And I've got enough of the spokes in now that the ones that are missing, I know I can see where they're supposed to be. So that makes it easy to add the ones that are missing. Just kind of run through this whole thing, get all those in. There we go. And now we could switch to the Pyrrole Red. So when I go over these spokes with Pyrrole Red now, they're a lot brighter than the ones in the back. They'll just pop forward. And that is just what I'm looking for. So you can start to see, like if I had to paint like the wheel hub underneath and all those highlights and everything and all the details underneath these spokes, in between the spokes, it'd be a nightmare. Trust me, I know, because I've tried. So now I have a little bit of the dark red, and now I can start having fun putting in the over and unders, so the shadows of one spoke over another, and some of the details like where the spokes attach to the wheel hub and things like that. And this is all the same paintbrush, so I tend to use this 00 for just about everything, no matter, this is a 5x7 painting, but even the razor blades use the same paintbrush and all that. It's just a great all-around detail brush. Now the highlights on the spokes, only a few of them get them. It's kind of like it seemed like the reflections were coming off of the pavement, not so much the sky. And that is how it came out. So I still got a little bit more to do, but I'm really happy with it. And I've got to get the hub done and the wheel. But if you like this, please subscribe and hit that like button. And if you are really into it, you can do what these lovely people have done on the Patreon side and also on the membership side. So that's what I got. So for Steve Leahy and Tech Tuesday, thanks very much for joining me.